They are known as Bumiputras, or sons of the soil, and comprise ethnic Malays and other indigenous groups, some 60% of Malaysia's population in all. For nearly 40 years now, a raft of affirmative action policies have tried to narrow the economic gap between the Bumiputras and other more successful communities, the ethnic Chinese in particular. Those policies have significantly reduced poverty and boosted the size of the Bumiputra middle class, but they've been far from a universal success.
The positive discrimination in favour of Bumiputras wasn't working. It was making the wealthy 5% of the Bumiputras a lot more wealthy, but the income discrepancy between people within Bumiputra community has widened.
Despite noting the policy's obvious failings, the country's leaders had barely tinkered with it, until now at least. At a recent meeting of foreign and local fund managers and investors, Prime Minister Najib Razak unveiled sweeping economic liberalisation measures. They do away with many facets of the affirmative action programme, particularly ones seen as barriers to foreign investment.
The world is changing quickly, and we must be ready to change with it or risk being left behind. It is not the time for sentiment. It is not the time for half measures, but to renew our courage, our pragmatism, to take the necessary bold measures to advance the national interest for the long-term benefit of all Malaysians.
Najib all but scrapped the powers of a committee that screened foreign investment and opened up the financial services sector to much higher levels of foreign ownership. And most significantly, he eliminated the need for companies listing on the stock market to sell 30% of their equity to Bumiputras. The policy had left hardly any additional equity in the hands of Malays, with almost all the shares having been flipped for a quick profit.
The new policy, I think, will make our economy more vibrant, more dynamic, and I think we will be quite high up on the radar screen of investors.
The liberalisation moves were almost universally welcomed.
To the international and actually domestic investment community, they will be very, very welcome. There was a lot of anticipation as to what sort of announcements there would be, and I believe they have not disappointed.
So the lifting of these measures, I think, is a very brave move from the Prime Minister. The policies that have been introduced are to encourage foreign companies to move into Malaysia and transfer technology expertise, and puts the pressure on Malaysians to move up the technology scale, and I think they're quite capable of doing it.
Najib says his government is still committed to seeing Malays and other Bumiputras eventually raise their corporate stake to 30%. To try to reach that target, it's creating a sort of private equity fund that will eventually reach some $2.5 billion to invest in deserving Bumiputra business ventures. The Malay founder of this successful halal food processing company feels the time is right for a new approach.
Over the last 10 years, I think we have seen a lot of new growth of Bumiputra businessmen. And I think these people are now quite ready to take advantage of the opportunities available under the new mechanism of the economic policy.
The public as a whole seem to be welcoming the policy changes. Opinion polls suggest Najib's approval ratings have soared from 45% in mid-May to 65% today. But he scores lowest among ethnic Chinese, who largely abandoned his ruling coalition in the 2008 elections. To try to ease their concerns, Najib is promoting a policy he calls One Malaysia. He says it will include assisting the needy and deserving of all communities, without leaving anyone feeling marginalized or discriminated against.
There will be skepticism on implementation, but as far as I'm concerned, to all those skeptics, at least the speech was made, and it's a good basis, and I think it's made to a very important group of people, so the Prime Minister has to deliver, and I think he wouldn't have taken that speech lightly, just as words.
They can't afford to be just words. Not if the new Prime Minister is intent on winning back support for his coalition and seeing Malaysia make the tricky transition from successful middle-income country to fully developed nation.